right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Entrepreneurship series where we chat with underrepresented entrepreneurs in the Midwest, learning more about their story, venture, and future. My name is Julian. I am the entrepreneur in residence at GVSU, and I'm with Kiara Baskin. Kiara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. I'll be completely honest. I had office hours a little bit earlier and I had to rush right real quick to get my hair cut, fresh for the occasion.
Right.
But super excited to have you. Just a few housekeeping items to just let everyone know who's on the webinar. We'll pretty much talk a little bit more about what it is that you do, and also we'll have some time towards the end for a Q&A, in which you should be able to hit the Q&A button and just type away. So I'll make sure to leave room for a Q&A at the end. But yeah, let's kind of get into it. So Kiara is the founder of Bump to Birth Doula Services. She is a dedicated birth worker who takes an integrative approach to birth and parenthood. With over 10 years of patient care experience and 6 years in maternal child health, Kiara has been recognized by Moms Bloom as Health Professional of the Year in 2019, one of Grand Rapids' Kids' top recommended doulas, and also received acknowledgement by way of proclamation recognizing Doula Appreciation Week as an official week in the city of Grand Rapids and the state of Michigan. To top it off, Kiara is the proud mother of 2 and West Michigan native. Wow, 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 wow. You sleep.
I don't.
I could imagine. So why don't you share for some of us who do not know, what is a doula?
Yeah, so a doula is a professional that is really trained in childbirth to provide informational, physical, and emotional support to expecting women and their families. And that's during pregnancy, during labor and delivery, as well as after baby is born.
Okay, cool. So so could you tell us a little bit more about, because there's multiple people within it, it's a community effort to bring a baby into this world. So aside from doulas, I know that there's midwives that are involved as well, right?
Yeah, so when a woman is expecting a baby, she can either receive care from an obstetrician or an OB, which most people are familiar with. Otherwise, a woman can seek services from a midwife. So a midwife is a clinician that is able to perform medical care, and they perform that either in a hospital setting, in a birth center, or for women who are wanting to deliver at home. A midwife is also able to help with those types of deliveries. But they're very similar to an obstetrician. The biggest difference is that a midwife deals with women who have uncomplicated pregnancies or uncomplicated deliveries, and midwives really focuses more on the holistic care and more of physiological birth, so just normal non-intervention birth.
Okay, interesting. So what led you to become a doula in the first?
So I became a doula really just out of my own birthing experiences. I have 2 children, and my birth stories from the first and the second are completely night and day. So with my first child, I did all the things, all the right things. I was pretty active. I made sure I ate well. I made sure I read all of the books, all of the blogs. I regularly saw my prenatal physician. I've attended all of the classes down to car seat installation, and ended up having an emergency cesarean section. I really didn't know how to advocate for myself. I really didn't know just kind of the normal processes that take place when you go into a hospital. And I really didn't know about induction either, which is what I had with my first pregnancy. So I kind of just got the domino effect of receiving multiple interventions. So receiving Pitocin, having my labor stalled for a while, just all of the things that happen. If you're unfamiliar kind of with the normal processes with the hospital delivery. And then ended up, having a really traumatic experience, not knowing why I had to have a cesarean section, not really explained as to why,
Right.
and what happened. So I really felt like, well, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my body? Why couldn't I have a regular vaginal delivery?
Right.
And then just kind of dealing with the healing effects, like being a new parent, being, immobile for most of, the first few weeks after having a newborn baby. So it was just really traumatic. And then what I did was really just researched other options because I felt like there were other options. Like there was no reason why, I had to have a cesarean section. I'm sure that there was something out there. And ended up learning about the role of a doula, and just learning about midwifery care, and more specifically, just how traditionally in the African American community, women have always supported women during childbirth. And that really resonated with me, and really just helped me to understand my culture a little bit better and understand that this was truly my calling, and it's always been within, my history, my cultural traditions, and then
Right.
really just went from there, and took off.
Right. Right. Yeah, there is like a really long and dark history of the study of medicine, especially on Black people for sure,
Mhm.
and on Black women, and also in fact, like there was this doctor named J. Marion Sims, I believe, who's like contributed as being known as the father of gynecology, where he's been known to do experiments on Black women without anesthesia whatsoever. But yeah, today millions of Black women face racial birth disparities. Can you tell us more about how these disparities show up and the impact of it?
Yeah, so locally within Kent County, Black babies are still twice as likely to die before their first birthday in comparison to their white counterparts. Black babies are also born too early, too small. The maternal mortality rate is still just not, it's not ideal,
Right.
for women of color in particular. Um, so the disparities still exist. And one of the things that I really do within my own practice with Bump to Birth is really just educate women on the history of obstetrics, understanding that, women have options, to really advocate for themselves, to do research, and to really ultimately be in the best position that they can be, even before conceiving. So if that means educating yourself, receiving annual wellness exams, um, just doing whatever you need to do so that you are healthy physically and mentally, even before conception. And then, once you get to the point of conception, walking alongside women throughout that process so that they understand, just kind of what to expect and things that they can do to put themselves in a better position, with the current disparities that are still relevant.
Right, right. Because like again, millions of women face like complications during pregnancy, birthing, and even like postnatal, of which like many celebrities such as like recently Chrissy Teigen, Beyonce, and Serena Williams face complications, just to name a few. Can you like tell us more of the role of a doula and midwives as they help support women and their families?
Absolutely. So as it relates to the disparities, like you can't educate yourself out of the outcomes, unfortunately. Like you mentioned, Beyonce, Serena Williams, Chrissy Teigen, all of these individuals that, make a good decent amount of money. They're all educated women. They all have, spouses that are there with them. They have amazing support systems, but still they face, the same disparities and the same outcomes as, a woman that's delivering at Spectrum Health. So I think one of the conversations we need to have is about just the systems that are in place, and really centering women of color, just as we provide care and deliver care to those women. It's really unfortunate that, this is just kind of the pattern that has happened just because of the systems that are in place. So what we do as doulas and as midwives is really, like I mentioned before, is educating women. We do everything in our power to educate women and to empower them to have a voice for themselves. So we don't make decisions for our clients when we service them. We're really just letting women know and their families know, like, hey, these are some of the things that you should consider. If you do go to the hospital and you do have an induction, you are going to be introduced to Pitocin. Is that something that you really want to do? And we allow our clients to say, well, hey, like, let me take a step back. Let me think about that. How is that going to affect me in my pregnancy and my labor and delivery? We educate spouses and significant others about, some of the signs and symptoms to look out for,
Right.
some of the like triggering things to look out for as it relates to just like bedside manner communication. And it's not to say, that physicians are bad or OBs are bad or hospitals, you
Mhm.
should stay away. It's really just educating women that you have a voice, like the doctors work for you. And if you don't utilize your voice or if you're unfamiliar with your options, you just kind of get what you get. And it's really about tailoring your birthing experience to what you would like and ultimately tailoring that experience and really educating yourself and being aware of your options and having a support and continuous support ultimately can have more positive outcomes for you.
Yeah. So could you kind of like share as far as like a step by step like outlook of like, let's say there is a woman who is pregnant, like, and they were to go to you, what would that process or what might that process look like?
Right. So in Grand Rapids, currently, there aren't a lot of doulas of color. So that is one thing that we are working on right now. We just launched a new community-based doula program, and I'm hoping to talk about that a little bit later. So we will have more doulas of color available in the community. But right now there aren't too many. But what you can do is just really Google is your best friend. There's Google, there's other specific websites for women of color that are seeking women of color. Doula, Sister Midwife is one of those um, that operates as a search engine where you can kind of plug in your demographics, things of that nature. And then you're able to search a doula within your area. Doula Match is another online kind of search engine where women can plug in their information and locate a doula within their area. So those are two really good ones. But also one of the best ways that, I just stay in contact with different clients and meet new women is word of mouth. When
Hmm.
women kind of learn about what a doula is, they realize that there's a woman of color in King County in the community that's servicing all women and women of color. The word kind of just spreads, and that's how women just kind of get in contact with me. And all it takes really is a phone call. Or even times I get women in the grocery store that just walk up to me and I may start a conversation with them about their experience, their pregnancy, and just say like, hey, have you ever heard of a doula? And then
Right.
that just starts kind of that intake process then.
Right. Or do you ever get like any like outreaches from friends and family be like, hey, Kiara.
Yeah, absolutely. I get them all the time.
That's,
Like, I'm just
that is
go-to.
awesome.
But ironically, I get a lot of dads too. I do a lot of community outreach events pre-pandemic. And I would just have dads come up and say like, hey, like, what is it that you do? And I explain kind of my role to them as like, I'm like a basketball coach or a golf caddy. And they really kind of understand that concept.
Right.
And then I just kind of explain what I do. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I'm definitely going to tell my wife about it. I'm going to tell my girlfriend. This is something that we want to look into. So I think it's really cool to have everyone kind of, ask those questions and inquire about it because doula services isn't something that's new. But it's something that's becoming a little bit more modernized and a little bit more mainstream, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, it's definitely what I would say is that it's definitely like it sounds like it's definitely been picking up because I had a few of my own friends talking about like, yeah, I'm gonna become a doula, I'm gonna become a doula. And I was like, oh, that's cool. What's a doula? And so then they would just school me on all things doulas and midwives. And to me, it was just a whole new world. But I find it like really important to learn that aspect. But how can men or how do men like show up and advocate and be allies for women's health, especially for Black women and women of color?
So I think like preconception or just your everyday man or male that isn't necessarily, planning to.
Oh, hold on, Kiara. I don't know. It might be like a mic issue, but I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yep, just faintly.
Perfect. So just for you, your everyday meal, one of the best things that they can do is just go and receive an annual exam, an annual wellness exam. Um, just having that established care with a provider is one thing that they can do just to understand, one, their own health and experience if they do plan to conceive at any point in time. But also just knowing, like, what does that look like? Like, having established care, having a provider, how do you facilitate those conversations with your provider? Because oftentimes it's really difficult for women to have those conversations, or to even remember, like, what is it that I need to ask my OB, or what is it that I need to ask my midwife? And even having a supportive friend or a significant other be able to say, like, hey, why don't you use your notepad and your phone to jot down some notes? This is what I do, when I talk to my doctor. But that's one way. But I think also just educating themselves on just the prenatal process. Like, what does that look like? What does conception look like? What does the labor progress look like? A lot of men don't even know what that looks like until they're actually in the room. And then at that point, it's like, sink or swim. And what do you do? Really fight or fight, or freeze, which a lot of men I see do.
Right.
But it's really important just to educate themselves just on the history of women and women of color as it relates to just obstetrics, gynecology, the birthing experience. I think it's really important, just to kind of do those two things as first steps. So really establishing care for themselves, with a provider, but also just educating themselves on just the processes and the steps that take place.
Yeah, I absolutely love that you are dropping gems of just like being that one who take notes, and actually doing the work and being more proactive about learning more about birthing, prenatal care, pregnancy, and postnatal care, because it's definitely not just about the woman in the situation. It takes like a village to make sure that this process is as successful as possible.
And I did just want to add one other thing that men can do, and I think it's important, whether they're planning to have a baby, whether they have sisters, moms, grandmothers. One of the most important things that men can do is listen to women, and especially listen to Black women. I think just even allies, that's one of the greatest things you can do, especially right now, is just really elevate the voice of women in the community, but also just taking a step to hold space for those women in your lives.
Yeah, that's key. It definitely reminds me of that, because I was watching, I believe it's like Becoming Serena. It was like an HBO, ESPN type thing.
Yeah.
In which I was really like surprised that Serena Williams, like one of the top best athletes in the world, still has to advocate for herself. And she has to, constantly be on them, to make sure that she gets the care that she needs. And oftentimes even like the doctor or the nurses weren't necessarily listening to what it was that she was feeling. Like when she was feeling pain, that pain was kind of ignored. Serena Williams, to me, that was, to me, it was surprising. And it was like disheartening to see and to know that this is probably a regular everyday occurrence. So definitely like the listen part and just, advocating and supporting in the best way.
Yeah,
for sure.
It just speaks to, like I mentioned earlier, the systems that are in place. Like I said, you can't educate your way out of, the unfortunate outcomes that happen. There's no amount of money, whether you have private insurance, whether you have Medicaid. Just the systems are unfortunate, and we really need to do something to start to address those. And one of the things that, I do within my practice is to, like I mentioned earlier, is educate women on their options, letting them know, like, modern day gynecology was built from, really unfortunate events. And a lot of women don't understand that. Educating women that there's studies out there that show that providers equate just pain tolerance to the color of your skin. Like if your skin is more melanated or darker complexion, you don't feel as much pain as your white counterparts.
Right.
And these are things that are just important to know, as you seek care, whether it be an individual provider or depending on the location where you give birth. I think it's really important for women to understand that your outcomes ultimately are, one of the factors depends on where you give birth and who delivers your baby, who provides your prenatal care. And just knowing that you can change prenatal providers and OBs at any point in time. You can change midwives at any point in time. If you're 39 weeks and 5 days, if you want to switch, you can switch.
Yeah, that's good to know, for sure, for sure. So you you said that, like, from your own experience, that you yourself wanted and you learned more about what it is that a doula does to support. What did your process look like to become a doula?
So what I did, because I wanted to pursue certification as a doula, I had taken a training program within, it's no longer existing, but in Granville, there was a midwifery practice, Midwifery Matters, and I took a doula training there. It was a 3-day period, 4-day course. And it really dug deep into the evidence-based research surrounding childbirth and surrounding supporting women. We learned about just childbirth in general. We learned about anatomy, learning about Black anatomy, learning about the health disparities and the inequities we see as it relates to our local communities. And then from there was extensive work. So a lot of readings, a lot of submitting papers, taking additional courses like CPR, first aid. I've also pursued birth assisting. So I've gotten additional certifications in like neonatal resuscitation, car seat installation. So really being able to service my community with wraparound services. But the process is really go at your own pace as it relates to becoming a doula. But it's really, really focused on that evidence-based care and understanding just the outcomes and really just looking at that research.
Okay. And then, well, you can go at your own pace, as you had mentioned, but typically, like, what is kind of like the time range, if you were to give a time range of how long it would take?
It really depends on your situation, but I would say like typically between 6 to 12 months. If you are pursuing like additional certifications, I do know certain training and certification programs do require you to submit like valid births, and meaning that you have to be there for a certain period of time providing continuous care. You have to have providers provide like a write-off or an observation of your care that you supported to your client. Your client needs to do an evaluation to just really express like how you supported them. So that is more of the hard work. That takes a little bit more time, but you could definitely obtain that within 6 to 12 months, depending on how connected you are with your community. If you already have clients or a targeted population that you kind of want to service. So,
Right. And then, do you happen to know like the process of becoming a midwife?
not 100%. I do know that there are 2 different pathways. So you can either become a certified nurse midwife, which would require you to take additional courses and you would have to be a registered RN. The other course would be certified professional midwife. And that training course is a little bit different, but all of them require you to actually put in hours and to take additional courses that are a little bit more advanced. And I did just want to share, because I'm really excited to share this, Grand Rapids just got our first certified professional midwife of color. There were none, I should say, in our area whatsoever. And Tiffany Townsend is the individual that just had gone through that certification and received her NARM certification. So she is able to practice within the state of Michigan.
That is awesome. Grand Rapids, we coming up.
Yeah, we are.
That is awesome. Cool. So I guess just to kind of like talk a little bit more about bump to birth doula services. What was it like as far as like starting your company up?
So I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in a 12-week training or business training course with Spring GR.
Mhm.
Spring GR really focuses on underserved communities and people of color that have an interest in entrepreneurship. And through that program, you go through a 12-week curriculum, which is super extensive. So it really just talks about like your dreams and aspirations. How do you set up your business if you want to be a sole proprietor, an S corp? But what's really unique about their program is that they really give you all of the tools. They
Mm.
pair you with a business coach. And then ultimately at the end, you have an opportunity to pitch your business after you've kind of grown and developed it, which is really nice. And then you have the opportunity to win seed money that you can ultimately invest back into your business or additional trainings or whatever you want to do. But that program is amazing for any entrepreneur that is looking to, take that leap of faith to really just push their idea. And one of the things that I really love about Spring GR is that you didn't have to have your idea pretty and packaged or your business. If it was truly an idea, like I like to cook food, I think I want to, have a food truck. They will take that and help you run with it. And ultimately, at the end of it, you could have a completely, pretty and packaged business plan. You could have customers, but they really set you up for success. So that's one of the first things that I did. Was take that business course with Spring GR, and it really changed just my entire life as it relates to bump to birth.
That's awesome. So was it that you already knew what it was that you wanted to do, or maybe you had like multiple ideas? Like, um, yeah, what did that look like for you?
I've always worked in community and I've always had a passion for obstetrics and just supporting women. If you asked me when I was in kindergarten, like what I wanted to be when I wanted to grow up, I wanted to be Cliff Huxtable. Like I really just wanted to be an obstetrician. I thought it was so dope to like just help women deliver babies.
Yeah.
So I
You
really just
reminded
kept
me.
that passion.
No, I just like had a flashback where I was just thinking of that like one episode where all the guys were pregnant and
Oh yeah.
they were, like delivering like the subs and
Mhm.
soda and whatnot. No, that was a funny episode, but I'm sorry.
No, but yeah, I've just always had that passion. I've always worked in maternal child health. So it was a really, really smooth transition. And almost like just a blessing for me to learn about the role of doulas and really just kind of took it and ran with it.
That's awesome. So, what was it like as far as like getting your first like customer or client?
So that experience was really unique. I actually just kind of went out on social media to say like, hey, I'm a doula in the community. I have a passion for serving all women. I have a special interest in serving women of color based off of the disparities. And I had women reach out. So I really didn't have to search far, to find clients. And one of my first families that I serviced, um, they were an amazing family. It was their second baby. And they had never, had a doula before, but they just knew that this was something that they wanted to try. And it was so amazing. Like dad got right in, like to learn some of the techniques. He helped me there's a technique I use called the double hip squeeze, where I'm squeezing the back of a woman's
Mhm.
backside during contractions, and it really helps to kind of alleviate some of that pain. And dad got right in there and started doing that double hip squeeze. They did the labor dance, like they were just all in it. Um, and they were just really appreciative of me kind of being there. One of the things that I don't think I highlighted enough was that with doula support, we provide continuous support. So when you call us to be there, we're there the entire duration of your labor. So if it's 3 hours, 30 minutes, 24 hours, 48 hours, you get us. Like we don't rotate shifts like a nursing staff. So you never have to like ask or inquire like who's going to be there because we're
Right.
going to be there. And that's one of the things that I really pride myself on and working with my families is that when you call me, you get me. You don't
That-
get anyone else, and you can guarantee that I'm going to be there that entire experience. But as it relates back to your question, like they just came. my families came and, I still talk to them. I send them, text messages on baby's birthday and say like, hey, how's it going?
Right.
So those are just some of the things.
Yeah. So like it really was just kind of like natural for you just to kind of like get like clients in just because, people are like really interested in learning more about doulas and birthing. That is cool. So could you kind of like share, because I noticed that, or I remembered that you mentioned that you are actively a part of the community. Could you share a little bit more about um, the other spaces that you're in?
Yeah, so I'm actually the chair of the Healthy Camp Breastfeeding Coalition, where we really just focus on community impact and educating
Uh,
women
I
on
think
breastfeeding.
you're fading a little bit out. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, it's fine. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I am a part of the Healthy Camp Breastfeeding Coalition. I do chair that coalition. And one of the things that we do is really focus on impact and how the birthing experience and breastfeeding experience really just kind of go hand in hand, but really just educating women on the benefits of breastfeeding and educating the community on what they can do to support breastfeeding. I also sit on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for Moms Bloom. And
Mhm.
Moms Bloom is an organization that supports women all throughout Kent County that need a little bit of assistance after baby comes home. And that service is completely free. And when I tell you it's like the Cadillac of just postpartum support, it is amazing because you can get a volunteer that literally just comes in. They can hold baby while you take a shower. They can help with light household tasks. They can also help with just keeping your other little ones just occupied while, you tend to whatever it is that you need to tend to. But I sit on those two boards. But I'm also just really invested in a part of my community. You can always catch me at any thrift store, at any baby store. You can catch me in the childbirth kind of self-help section at the bookstores. But I really just try to make myself available to community and showing up in spaces where I know, is really where a lot of my community just kind of congregate and get together. And then ultimately just have a conversation, not even related to childbirth, just how are you doing as it relates to health and wellness? What have you done for yourself? So really just sparking those conversations with community. And then ultimately, if we do talk about doula support, then I'm always willing to
Yeah.
share just about that benefit and then make that connection and talking about just knowing what your options are.
Yeah. So speaking of connection, and this is actually one of the questions that we have from the attendees of this webinar is COVID, 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 COVID. Like, how have you been like? Have you been impacted by the pandemic at all? And like, do you see more people seeking doulas during this time?
So COVID has been crazy for everyone. So in the very, very beginning, I received a lot of phone calls and emails for women just wanting to receive doula services or wanting to know about home birth and their options because they didn't feel safe going into the hospital. Um,
Mhm.
which is to be expected when you hear the word pandemic and I'm having a baby. Just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean that, babies still aren't being born. Women still don't need support and services and supplies. So I think during the pandemic, a lot of women were experiencing super, stressful times, very high cortisol levels, which isn't good for baby at all. So what I had to do within my own business is really pivot and being able to provide virtual services to women. Um, I am now currently seeing women out in the community and in their homes. But in those very early stages of the pandemic, I did only provide virtual and telephonic phone calls. And those are all trial and error. I
Yeah.
hadn't, prior to the pandemic, offered virtual support, but establishing kind of just that support service has been super beneficial for a lot of women, knowing that they can still receive, support and services that they need. But also, it also offered me the opportunity to just reach a broader audience
Right.
During the pandemic, I was able to create and establish a YouTube channel to really just provide education. During the pandemic, a lot of childbirth education courses were canceled because they weren't offering in-person support. So I was still able to make sure families had that evidence-based research information that they could get and feel confident about. And then even going so far as to, record family and friends to say like, hey, I need a model because I need to show these comfort techniques and I don't have a pregnant mom to do that with. Like, can you do this? Because the people need to know.
Yeah. Could you actually share with us what's the name of your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so it's just Bump to Birth Doula.
Okay. So
Yep.
just a simple like YouTube search bump to birth. Okay. I'm definitely
On
gonna
YouTube.
check it out. I'm curious. I want to learn some more.
I have a couple videos out there, one specific to doula support, going virtual, and then I have another video talking about breastfeeding support, and then I'll be updating those more regularly.
Right. Okay. Okay. So could you tell us a little bit more about kind of like what does like a session look like with a doula?
Yeah, so it's really conversational. I really try to not be as formal with those sessions when I meet with families. One, because they're probably super high anxiety. They don't know what to ask. This is
Mhm.
probably their first interaction with the doula. So I just make it really conversational. Hey, congratulations. How has your pregnancy been going so far? Tell me about your experiences. Tell me about, your life at home. Have you, been familiar with the doula before? If they say no, then I kind of just give them, the rundown as far as what a doula is. But it's really just a conversation, just talking to them about what their dreams and desires are for their birthing experience. What do they feel would be beneficial as they think about their support team when they get ready to deliver? Talking to them about what their options are. A lot of women don't know that, oh, I can have my baby at home if I wanted to, or oh, there's actually a birth center like in Grand Rapids on the southeast side. Like a lot of
Yeah.
women don't know that. So I just really let them know, like, this is everything that is available to you. If you want to try it all, I can definitely walk alongside you as you try it all. Or we can kind of curate and tailor, a care plan that's specific, that meets your desires. And I also talk to women about just kind of being realistic as they plan for their pregnancy and their experiences. Like, unfortunately, you can't get everything that you want because what happens at the end of the day is really up to baby and what your body does. So just talking to women about being flexible, but still having some of their desires met, but ultimately you're really just elevating that experience and making sure that they have a positive one.
Okay. And then could you share a little bit more about like any did you happen to have like any challenges in starting bump to birth, and what did they look like?
So one of the initial challenges was just around people not knowing what a doula was.
Mhm.
I think that term is a little new for a lot of individuals within the community, but like I mentioned before, historically, if you talk about with the elders in the community, if you talk about granny midwives or women supporting women, or if you look at movies like Big Mama's House, where there was a scene where Big Mama actually helped to deliver a baby within the community. Those are all kind of more modern things that you can look to and say like, oh, that's a doula, but they may not have necessarily like termed that within the modern media. So I think that term is new. So that was one of the challenges, is just educating people, one, on the term, educating them on what it is that we actually do. But I'm really happy that a lot more individuals within the media are now accessing doulas. So if you look at Tamara Maury and Tia Maury, like they've had doulas. If you look at most recently Tiana Taylor and her second pregnancy, she had a doula. Erica Badu was actually her doula. So
One of my
I
favorite
just think
artists.
mine too. I just think it's becoming a lot more mainstream and a lot more people are super interested. There's also been interviews with doulas done on the Breakfast Club, which is a podcast So it's becoming a lot more relevant. You can, it's searchable information now. So I'm really just excited to see how it's growing and developing. But initially, those were some of the challenges, was just letting people know like what a doula was.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I had a conversation with my mom because I was like super excited. I was like, Mom, I'm about to interview Kiara and she's dope and da 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 da. And I said like I told her that you were a doula and she was like, wait, a doula, it sounds familiar, but I typically hear them as midwives. So yeah.
So yeah, and a lot of people get that confused because the roles do seem like they're very similar. The difference is that doulas don't do anything clinical, so we're not checking vitals, we're not catching babies, and our focus is more so on mom and the support team,
Mhm.
and really just kind of being there and monitoring the environment, but also going through comfort techniques, providing evidence-based information, and really just making sure that our clients are educated and they're able to advocate for themselves. Whereas your midwife is actually going to catch your baby.
Right, right. Gotcha, gotcha. So what are some of the things that like were you ever like unsure if your venture would be successful? Have you ever had like doubts when you were like growing and building Bump to Birth?
I think every entrepreneur has those moments where it feels like a roller coaster. Like there's really good days and there's really bad days. And I can speak from my own experience just with the pandemic. That was like, no one expected that to happen. And you had to pivot and pivot really fast.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it was kind of like, well, what do I do? All of my service delivery is based off of being in person and like holding hands and really talking to families. Um, but I was able to really just take a step back, take a breather. I had a few conversations with a few of my other business colleagues about like what they were doing with their businesses. And a lot of people were just talking about like going virtual. And I'm like, well, what does that look like for a doula? And can I do that? And how does that work? Because do I want to have them set up like an iPad during the labor and delivery and say like, hey, like call me when you're ready to go? But a lot of women do prefer that to happen, or does it work better if, we're just on the phone and I'm coaching them through or developing like pre-recorded videos that they can access.
Right.
um, so I think just kind of going through the pandemic and having to make those pivots, entrepreneurship definitely is a roller coaster. But I've had really, really good and successful times as well. Being recognized by my community as, a top doula, receiving the proclamation by both the mayor of Grand Rapids and Governor Whitmore to acknowledge that, doulas are important. We should have a week to celebrate who we are. There's a nurses week. Why can't there be, a doula week?
Right.
Um, so I think just having that community support is really, really nice. And those are like my highs, and it really balances it out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, just the simple fact that like I believe that there's no such thing as a self-made person, and it's just like, evidence within itself, it truly is a community to be able to learn and grow and making sure that we're all moving forward. Um, that's awesome. So, what are like some of the highlights of building Bump to Birth?
Yeah, so there's so many. Like I've been really blessed to have a really nice experience just as I really build my business. Being featured on several different podcasts, being featured in several local news articles. Um, but none of that would be possible without the support of my community. I mean, I give all of my acknowledgments, to my community for supporting me and uplifting me, and just really being accepting of another means of care for themselves. Um, I think is really huge, and one of my biggest accomplishments is just having my community support. Um, but also being able to really affect systems and outcomes for my community. Um, I'm at several different tables and having conversations with several different leaders about what does it look like to have a doula-friendly facility? What does it look like for policy change as it relates to doula care and having it reimbursed by Medicaid? What does it look like as we implement community-based doula programs for our community? Like, there's just so many great things, that are happening right now surrounding this work, and especially midwifery. Like I mentioned earlier, Grand Rapids getting their first, woman of color certified professional midwife. That's huge. Like, that is going to change so many people's lives.
Yeah.
And I think about just the next generations, and as they plan, to conceive. Like, it's just going to be different. And I think that's really, really nice.
Okay. And this is going to be kind of like one of my final questions before going into Q&A. So those who are watching, I hope that, this is now is the time to start typing into the Q&A function. But I'm curious, what's next for Bump to Birth? What does the future look like?
Yeah, so the future looks very bright. So I'm hoping to launch a full service community agency for doulas. That is my biggest dream, is really just to have an agency of doulas that are available for the community and to service women. I think also having the pandemic and really just transitioning over to a virtual platform and learning that, but I'm really hoping to just kind of solidify that and what it looks like for the future. Because like I mentioned, the internet is wide. You can reach so many different populations all across the world online. So just having, that access and utilizing technology more in my business is definitely going to help and be great. But those are two of the biggest things that I'm really just hopeful to have launched in the near future, is just really focusing on utilizing technology more and reaching a more broader audience, but also developing and growing that agency.
Hey, let's get it. Okay, awesome, awesome. Well, again, we do have a few questions from the panelists. So we have someone who is excited to hear a little bit more about doula training. How can people enroll, and are there any prerequisites for the training?
Yeah, so with the community-based doula program, we are incubated right at Baxter Community Center, so right in the heart of the community. And I'm super excited about this program. It's really just my baby. It's our community's baby. And we're ready, to start accepting women into the program who are interested in becoming doulas. So one of the prerequisites, you do just have to live in Kent County and you have to identify as a woman of color. But we're providing the training completely free of charge. So there is no charge. There are no other prerequisites as far as additional education or anything like that. As long as you have a desire to service women of color within your community and give back, if you have a desire to become a doula, you live in Kent County and you identify as a woman of color, you can absolutely participate. And then that training session would be 20 sessions. And then we are building a curriculum that really is relevant to Kent County and our local data as it relates to those disparities in birth outcomes for women of color. But then after that, we really put you on a path to certification and additional opportunities to become a certified professional doula, and ultimately additional career pathways. I think doulas are one of those first initial steps towards midwifery, towards obstetrics, towards nursing, towards lactation. Like, there's so many different avenues you can take. And being a doula really exposes you to all of those different elements and all of those different career paths.
Yeah, I'm happy that you mentioned that, because it's a great way to have it as a career, but also be able to start your own company just as you.
And then one of the other benefits of becoming a doula, if you take any additional trainings or certifications, I mentioned briefly earlier, like I have a certification in car seat safety. I have a certification in neonatal resuscitation to provide services as a birth assistant. There's so many different things you can do. So, even as you become a doula, if you say like, hey, well, I want to add this to my toolkit, I want to do this, primarily. You can do placenta encapsulation. There's just so many different things that you can do, just as
Well,
like side hustles. Like, so many options.
right. Wow. Cool. So we have like someone who is thanking you for all that you're doing, and is so glad to just know about you and your services. What are some of the other things that you provide through your company?
So I'm also a certified lactation counselor, so providing breastfeeding support, and just infant feeding support to families within the community is something that I also offer through Bump to Birth. I am working on placenta encapsulation, so I should have that pretty soon. So that's just another avenue, but also car seat installation too. And a lot of times, when I introduce that, a lot of people are like, well, I don't have kids. Why do I need to know about car seat installation? If you're transporting any child, it's important to know. So if you have a niece or a nephew that you get on a weekend, or if you have a little cousin that you see, periodically, it's really important to understand how to install a car seat safely, not only for yourself, but for that child as well. It's just crazy, the evidence and the statistics out there about how many car seats are installed correctly, or installed incorrectly, I should say. And I want to say, but don't quote me on this, I think it's like 97% of car seats are installed incorrectly.
Oh my gosh.
And it doesn't take a lot of strength or muscle, because sometimes you'll see like on commercials or on TV, like dads trying to insert car seats and it looks like super, super hard. It doesn't take a lot of strength or muscle. It's really just about educating yourself about, one, your vehicle, the car seat, and then just having an expert take a look at it so that you can get it installed. So those are just a few of the options that I offer. So primary birth doula support, I do offer postpartum support, lactation support, and then car seat installation.
And then could you like share real quick, what is postpartum?
So a postpartum doula is a doula that just supports you after baby is born. So once you are either arriving back at home after you delivered in a hospital or a birth center, or immediately right after you have baby at home, we're there to support you kind of with your needs. So I didn't mention it during our conversation today, but typically through my services, I would develop like a birth plan or a wish list for my clients. We would we would develop a postpartum plan for women, like once they come home. And what that would look like would be identifying like your circle of support, who's going to be there for you, identifying like hours that you want visitors and hours that you don't want visitors, talking about some of the things that you need at home, really kind of setting up, the home for a new baby, having those conversations with siblings about, the new adjustment. So really just developing that care plan, but ultimately a postpartum doula would support you after delivery up until usually about 1 to 2 visits, but sometimes it can even extend beyond that.
Cool. All right. So like I'm about to just kind of like wrap it up, but thank you, Kiara, and everyone for joining. Just out of curiosity, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if anyone is interested in participating or learning more information on how to partner with the community-based doula program specifically, I can be reached at Kiara at baxtercommunitycenter.org. And if you're interested just in Bump to Birth and what I'm doing with my business or seeking services, you can reach me at Bump to Birth Doula, GRR@gmail.com. And I am on social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at that same social media handle. So Bump to Birth Doula, GRR.
Yep, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna check out your YouTube channel.
Yes, absolutely. Check it out.
Also, it just like popped into my head. But would you like do a like sort of car seat tutorial on YouTube?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I have to watch that that episode or that vid. And then is there any thing that you would like to share or anything that would be helpful?
I just want to really encourage people, not even expecting families or expecting women, just to really know your options, having a really firm relationship with your healthcare provider, making sure that you know your body. Um, I think those are really important things to make sure that you have, just kind of in your toolkit, or that you keep at the forefront of your mind. But also as it relates to just women and women of color in general, listening to them and centering at the care that's being provided. The disparities are there, they're not going anywhere until we actually acknowledge kind of just what's going on and we make changes. So really just listen to the women in your community. If you can walk alongside them, that's great. Um, but like I mentioned before, just knowing your options, I think is one of the biggest, things that I want people to walk away with today is knowing your options and then also knowing that it's okay to have additional support and it's okay to ask for help too.
Awesome. Kiara, it's an honor. It's great to have you, and thank you again so much for sharing such insight and information and wisdom. And also, I want to encourage everyone to make sure that they come back. On October 27th, we will be hosting Alita Kelly, founder of the Southeast Market, as part of our Entrepreneur Series. So once again, thank you, and hope to see you in a few weeks.
Yes.